What are lawyers who are representing these federal workers telling you about the legality of these demands?
Well, there are real questions about whether they even have to respond to this email. And we are seeing the legal pushback already this morning in what appears to be the first court case today to address this. Unions had first sued in California, a federal court in California last week in an attempt to block Donald Trump's firing of federal employees. Well, they've updated that lawsuit to now also include this Elon Musk request that was made over the weekend to explain what they accomplished. And their argument is that there is no regulation that requires federal workers to have to report outside of their chain of command what they have accomplished. And that is the argument that they're making here. We've even heard from some Republican lawmakers who question the legality of this request, Dana.
Yeah, we sure have. Starting to hear more and more. Renee, thank you so much for that reporting, as always, particularly on this topic. I'm joined by three other amazing reporters here. Ested Herndon of the New York Times, Lisa Lerer, also of the New York Times, and CNN's very own Brian Stelter. Well, happy Monday to everybody, to those who celebrate. Lisa, I want to start with you on the big picture of what we could go down a million rabbit holes here, but let's just talk about what we have seen with this email and the goal here, which we know he's the king of disruption. By he, this time I mean Elon Musk, but you can also say the same thing about Donald Trump. And I'm going to get Brian to talk about this in a second as well. Anybody who has spent 5 minutes looking at the way Elon Musk carries himself out at his startups and eventually at his big businesses, this is the way he operates.
Yeah, he smashes first and then, makes decisions later. I think Washington is not one of his businesses. And as you well know, Washington runs on one central currency, which is power. Who has it and who doesn't. And I think what was so interesting to me about this weekend is we started to see the tiniest glimmers of some sort of power wrangling and fighting within the MAGA world, within Trump's administration, when you had these agency heads who were, of course, appointed and selected by Trump, telling their workers at their agencies not to reply to this Musk email. And we have heard some quiet concerns from people in Trump's orbit that maybe Musk has grown too powerful, that maybe they want to have jurisdiction over their own agencies and the ability to make these complicated decisions about who to cut and how to trim. So, it's hard to say because we're in such unprecedented territory and all these things, but we may be starting to see a little bit of a backlash to where Musk is going. And certainly we're seeing that in the polling. His numbers, he's not very popular among the broader American public, among independents, and his numbers have even dropped among Republicans.
So just the way that Elon Musk approaches this, which again is very typical, it's the kind of humor, I guess you would say, that he uses with a lot of things in his life. He posted something, it was a meme with SpongeBob, and then Donald Trump reposted it, kind of making fun of people who are upset about the fact that he is firing people and claiming that these federal workers really don't work. But on what Lisa was saying, on that note, John Curtis, who is a new Republican senator from Utah, listen to what he said over the weekend.
If I could say one thing to Elon Musk, it's like, please put a dose of compassion in this. These are real people. These are real lives. These are mortgages. It's a false narrative to say we have to cut and you have to be cruel to do it as well. We can do both.
The starting point here is that it makes a lot of sense, in theory, to go and ask all the employees what they're doing. Right? Elon Musk would say that's common sense. He did this to the then CEO of Twitter before forcing out the CEO of Twitter and taking over Twitter a couple years ago. And I think we should recognize, to a lot of Americans, this makes perfect sense, right? Tell us what you did last week. What are your accomplishments? Lots of people are used to doing that in their jobs. Of course, it gets really complicated really quickly when you're dealing with classified information or if you're not checking your work email over the weekend. So I understand it's not the common sense that he claims it is, but I think we should understand why people, this appeals to people, why the memes appeal to a lot of people, right? It's actually nonsense, but it sounds like common sense.
And I think even if we look back to the comparison with Twitter, there was a lot of assumptions when Musk was doing that disruption that the app wouldn't work, that it was the kind of folly on his part. I think largely he's fine with how that has turned off. It's allowed him to shift culture and narrative. It's become a kind of free speech bastion and the kind of conservative spin on it that he really desired when he took that over. That influence play has worked. I think, though, to Lisa's point, it's a little different when we're talking about government because
Very
it seems
different.
more than this is. I think what Musk is doing exposes that the kind of Trump view on this point is about more than fraud or waste. It's about attacking expertise in general. It's about attacking the federal government and actually, I think, making a broader point, pushing back against I would really say science. I would say, people who are
Shared reality.
Shared
A shared
reality.
reality.
And
That
standards
left the
of
building.
authority and lanes, right?
Yeah.
It's not clear. Musk could do this at Twitter because he was in charge of Twitter. He is not in charge. There are questions about whether he has, and that's what some of these agencies are rating,
so-
the authority to do this
Yeah.
at all.
So let's put some meat on these bones. If you have gone too far for Kash Patel, you probably have gone too far. So let's see what Kash Patel had to say about this to his employees. The FBI, through the Office of the Director, is in charge of all of our review processes and will conduct reviews in accordance with FBI procedures when and if further information is required, we will coordinate the responses. For now, please pause any responses. And then as you kind of digest that, there's something else that our team put together, and I think that this is really critical for people to understand. Look at this map. That is a map of where federal workers are who are living in the states that Trump won. Look at that number. It's almost 1 million people. So yes, it's own Washington, drain the swamp, all the things, but the reason why we are starting to see and hear more concern and even backlash around the country and even from Republican House members and senators is because these are their constituents.
Correct. And I think there's a broader political question here, which is, does the American public at large care about these federal workers? Most people probably don't know someone, certainly if you're outside of Washington, D.C., that's been impacted by this. So that's the first question. How much do they care about these workers getting laid off and all of that? But there's another question, too, which is how people feel about Musk running what appears to be a little bit rampant across the federal government. And we have some indication in polling that people aren't so happy with that, that they are relatively happy with Trump, but they are not as happy with Musk. And so this becomes a big power struggle, and it will become a test of how much power he is given by the president to do this.
But it did start over the weekend with the president. The president saying, I want Musk to be more aggressive. So I think that is really important context for what Musk is tweeting now, asking people to tell what they've done, saying they're going to go back to work or they're going to be fired. It's interesting also how Musk has tried to reframe this in the last 24 hours. He said, I'm just trying to do a pulse check. I'm just trying to see if y'all are alive, right? He's claiming there's dead people on the payroll. So he's walked it back a little bit, but he was told by Trump, be in all caps, be more
he was
aggressive.
told-
It's also a convenient situation for Trump to have someone else being the
Exactly.
face of this.
That's exactly
and we
what it
certainly
is.
have seen a
Definitely.
long
Definitely.
history of Trump using other people as sort of becoming his fall guy for things that become unpopular.
I just want to
with the
get
public.
one other point in here, which is how the Democrats have reacted over the weekend. A lot of Democratic senators have posted the 5 things that they did last week as a way to kind of take a jab at Musk. Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota successfully asked you to rehire 300 nuclear and avian flu workers, pressed you to pay attention to rising household costs, stood up for vets, fought against your tax cuts for the rich, stood with Ukraine. And then there is her colleague from Minnesota who is clearly out the door. She said she was not going to run again, Tina Smith. Check this out. This is the ultimate D-boss move from Musk, except he isn't even the boss. He's just a D. We're just going to leave it there.